We're here with our next speaker, SHIVA BISSESSAR, who will be talking about CBDC experience in the Caribbean, which should be quite interesting. I don't actually know much about the details of what's been going on in the Caribbean, so I'm really looking forward to this talk. So yeah, thank you, Shiva, for joining us.
So yeah, I've expanded the format of the talk beyond CBDCs to get into digital currency and virtual asset regulation as well. So a lot has been taking place over the past 10 years in the Caribbean. So I know you expressed that you didn't know, so let me be the first to share some insights with you. So
Great.
When we talk about the Caribbean, this is the area that we're talking about. Just in between South America on this side here and North America on this side here. And on this side here would be Central America. The Caribbean is also comprised of these countries shown here. I would say Guyana and Suriname to the bottom here would also be considered part of the Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean. And Belize as well would be considered part of the English-speaking Caribbean up on this side here. So just to give you a global context of where we're situated, this is where we are. The agenda for today, like I said, I was originally going to talk just exclusively on CBDC, but our work at Pinaka, we've been doing work in digital currency and fintech research for over a decade now, contributing to the Caribbean wealth of information of what is taking place here, research into digital currency activity, research into virtual asset regulation, even looking at illicit virtual asset transactions within the Caribbean. And we've also worked with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank on implementing as a part of the consulting focus within the ECCB group, implementing that retail CBDC DCash for the pilot operation. So we're going to touch on each of these areas: digital currency and fintech research, virtual asset regulation, CBDC in the Caribbean, and we're going to focus on the ECCB, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, which is the monetary authority for the Eastern Caribbean Union. And we're going to look at what took place within that retail CBDC pilot. And then we're going to look a little bit wider within the Caribbean, because we have two other central bank digital currency projects, retail central bank digital currency projects taking place in Bahamas and Jamaica. So Pinaka Consultant, we've been around for over a decade now, just about 11 years. SHIVA BISSESSAR, I'm the managing director, program manager, principal consultant. My technical lead is Javed Samuel. Javed is originally from St. Lucia. He resides in the US now. He is really technical brains in the outfit. I'm no longer technical. He's a MIT Oxford graduate at the master's level, former Rhodes Scholar as well. And the work that we did with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, we did document it within this publication, Central Bank Payment News, October 2022 issue. And basically we reflected on what that journey was like. And we'll talk about some of that journey within this presentation. But let's start off with the digital currency research, digital currency and fintech research, because my expertise in this area was really developed in when I did my master's at University College London. I did a thesis looking at Bitcoin transaction flows and the mapping to a geographic location and mapping activity as well. When I returned to the Caribbean after that course of study, I focused more on the socioeconomic aspects of how can we leverage this new technology to improve, the various ills that plague our society with respect to payments. So we worked with the ECLAC, which is the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. It's a UN body. We started a project with them in 2014, looking into the opportunities and risks of digital currency within the Caribbean. And that report was published in 2016. Part of that report would have entailed the summary of questionnaires that would have been sent out to 8 regional central banks, seeking out their perspective on digital currency. And at that point in time, I think central banks were a bit hesitant to really comment substantially on the topic. They were just grappling with the issue, and some central banks still coming to terms with this whole concept of digital currency, virtual assets, and so on. And they need to do so in preparation for the virtual asset regulation that needs to be established, given some of FATF requirements. The conduct of 2 expert group meetings also took place within this study, where we had innovators, entrepreneurs, regulators, all come together in a room and share their perspectives on what they would like to do with digital currency and how it may affect the region. And of course, the entrepreneurs would have painted that picture of their genuine interest in bettering the society, and as well the regulators would have painted that picture of the need to protect consumers from unwanted risks. So we had a good study here. This was published in 2016. It's available worldwide. And I believe this was only the 2nd paper published by the UN at the time on the topic of digital currency. So this was some groundbreaking work, not just for the Caribbean, but globally. And later on in 2018, we did some work with the IDB, the International Development Bank. They have an outlet here called Compete Caribbean. And the work was published eventually by the UK Department for International Development. And it was themed understanding the role of fintech companies and regulation in enabling Caribbean micro, small, medium enterprises to innovate and grow. So how can we leverage fintech again to ease some of the ills we see within society with respect to not just payments, but other areas where we can have a potential fit of this technology? Within this research, we had 4 cases included, 4 case studies included on central bank perspectives with respect to payment system development, which included some conversation on central bank digital currency. And in fact, I believe one of the central banks interviewed at the point in time would have said that they were not interested in central bank digital currency, and it was only when the governor changed that the position changed, and that particular central bank now has a central bank digital currency within the Caribbean region. So these are 2 reports publicly available. If you want to get some further insights into what has been taking place in the Caribbean, these are readily available. In between these 2 reports, we also worked with the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, to put on a couple of workshops in 2016 and 2017 on the topic of fintech. And the purpose of that would have been to inform regulators, policymakers, decision makers, technocrats, entrepreneurs, and innovators as well on this growing area of not just digital currency, but fintech mobile money, regtech, regulatory sandboxes. Various topics were covered in these two workshops that were delivered in the Caribbean, and there is record of these interventions on YouTube. So a wealth of experience we've had in researching the area of fintech and capacity building within the Caribbean on fintech and central digital currency, and later on central bank digital currency. So we're going to shift gears a little bit now into virtual asset regulation and illicit activity. Pinaka Consulting was involved in some work looking at illicit activity in the Caribbean region with respect to virtual asset illicit activity in 15 Caribbean states. The report itself is not public, but we can speak to some information which is within the public domain per se. So within some of the literature that is out there, you would note, of course, that the Bahamas has the DARE Act, the Digital Assets Act, and there was an earlier version of this, and it has been amended now into the DARE Act 2024. Bahamas is, of course, one of those territories within the Caribbean that is, I would say, very much leading the charge with respect to having an opening and inviting environment for fintechs to set up shop and participate and bring virtual asset products to the market. They have been very open. And I think a real key area that they pronounced on would have been regulation. And that is why you have this open and inviting environment. So once entrepreneurs see this regulatory clarity, it can serve as a boon for the exploration of innovation. And the good thing about having regulation in place is that you are catering to managing the risks as well. So for example, you may want to have the virtual asset service providers either licensed or regulated in some way with some authority, supervisory authority on island. And the Bahamas has led the way in the Caribbean in this regard. Of course, there is illicit activity, and we all know of the FTX incidents, the fallout from the FTX collapse, let's say. But the good thing to note about FTX is that, you know, there was swift and rapid action taken. And there was cooperation between the Bahamas authorities and the US government, the US DOJ. And of course, as well, there was one thing to note is that the fraud that was committed in the FTX case in particular, it was not anything of particular. It had nothing to really do with crypto. It was just plain old fraud, which can happen at any entity or enterprise or corporation. So a lot of lessons to learn here from the Bahamas experience with FTX. I think the important lesson is for the Caribbean is that it is okay to be permissive of and create an environment inviting to virtual asset service providers to set up shop within your territory once you put the regulation in place, once you put the control measures in place. For example, one of the things you may need is a method to deal with the seizure of digital assets. And that's a whole area by itself that you need to contend with. But it's important to get things on the books and then develop the operational capacity to execute on the legal and regulatory aspects that you put in place. So I certainly look at Bahamas as an example of leadership within the Caribbean in this space, and the hope is that other Caribbean territories may follow. And just to contrast, how Caribbean territories may view this whole area of virtual asset regulation, my own country, Trinidad and Tobago, we've been a little behind, noting that, almost 10 years ago, yes, 10 years ago, we did the ECLAC study. We are only now seeing some semblance of an attempt to form a position on virtual asset and cryptocurrency. Although it's late, it's good. It's good that it's happening. The regulators held a public forum on topic of virtual assets and cryptocurrency and potentially how to treat with it in September 2023. We were promised that by Q2 2024, we would have like a draft of what that regulation may look like. That has not been produced as yet, or it has not been circulated to the public as yet. We have noted some action in this latest quarter, in October. We noted that a questionnaire was issued inviting comments or inviting feedback from the public on how they view something like this. So it's been slow, but it's coming to pass. And we hope that at some point we do see regulation coming out that could both take an exploratory look at the innovation that virtual assets may offer, and as well as cater to the risks. The IMF did a technical assistance on Fintech in Trinidad and Tobago in 2023. And one of the recommendations would have been an impact assessment on how to move forward with that legal and regulatory, creating that legal and regulatory provisions for crypto assets. I don't have much more update than that. It is instructive to note as well that the national risk assessment on virtual assets and VASPs has commenced in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is a good thing, because what we've noted is that territories that take a look at performing such risk assessments become better educated on virtual assets and what it is and what it's all about and what it's not. Because I think there's a lot of fear with respect to virtual assets, which may be unfounded. And I think when countries go through this national risk assessment exercise, they become better informed of some of these risks and are better able to give a clear, objective picture of, okay, these things are risks and maybe these are not risks. So that is a good thing that is taking place. Oh, and Pinaka, of course, we serve on that risk assessment body. Illicit activity within Trinidad and Tobago, what we've taken note of is a prevalence or a few instances of entities promising impossible returns if users send crypto. And there have been some very public cases of this. One entity has since gone under, and that entity is now under investigation by authorities. So this is just part of parcel of what you have within the territory right now. Within the Eastern Caribbean, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, they lent assistance to coming up with a template which the 8 territories, the 8 independent states of the Eastern Caribbean Union could adapt and adapt to their own individual countries' needs. So that legislation is in place now in all 8 Eastern Caribbean territories. And within that, you will find, for example, a mixture of some territories choosing to license virtual asset regulators, virtual asset service providers, and some may choose to just register virtual asset service providers. And it all depends on their which route they want to take, which may be an easier route to take for them, a more manageable route to take for each particular territory. In terms of illicit activity, we have noted from some of the FATF mutual evaluation reports that in Dominica, there was an instance of a virtual asset service provider defrauding hundreds of thousands of dollars in an online crypto scheme, defrauding Dominicans of this of their monies via this scheme. And we did note as well that the US DOJ has opened a case against Hyperverse, and we know that this particular entity was positioning services or was grabbing the attention of end consumers and users within some of the Eastern Caribbean states. So it is good that some of these things come to the fore and action is taken place before more significant damage takes place. So in Guyana, the Compliance Commission Act, there are provisions effectively banning virtual assets until 2025. And the reason for this is that they are banned until a particular office is opened, which can serve as the the entity that would license or regulate the virtual asset service providers. But effectively, until this date, activity is banned. Within Guyana, there's a high-profile case, Yuri Garcia case, which seems to be along the lines of a Ponzi scheme, basically. In Belize, there's a similar provision within some of the legislation there that prevents virtual asset service providers from operations until this particular office is set up in 2025. And some of the recommendations that I would say need to be followed by the supervisory authorities within the Caribbean region to prevent illicit activity of virtual assets would be increased and continued surveillance, additional human resources, financial resources, capacity building. These are all required by supervisory authorities. Some of the tools that are needed are very expensive, very costly tools. In the commercial, there are commercial versions and there are open source versions. But blockchain analytics is important for both regulators and law enforcement if you are permissive of or have an environment where VASPs are registering and reporting to supervisory authorities in your jurisdiction. Technical requirements of implementing FATF recommendation need to be considered. So, for example, the travel rule, it is not as simple as a compliance checkbox. There may be some systems that need to be put in place by the VASPs to accommodate the requirements of the travel rule. Information sharing and collaboration, that is something that we note is key. Because this is such an advanced area for supervisory authorities within the Caribbean, for law enforcement within the Caribbean, it is best that, bodies band together and learn together, and as well collaborate with the virtual asset service providers so you could understand their business model and what is taking place. A lot of learning and information sharing is required so that we can advance our education within this area. Capacity development is definitely required for both law enforcement and regulators. And of course, you build capacity further by utilizing consultants from within the Caribbean. And that's a shameless plug, but it is necessary. Okay, so now we're going to change gears a bit and talk about not digital currency, not virtual assets, not cryptocurrency. We're going to talk about central bank digital currency, retail central bank digital currency. And at one point within the Caribbean, we had 3 retail central bank digital currency deployments in operation in Jamaica, in Bahamas, and in the Eastern Caribbean. So I've highlighted here the Eastern Caribbean states. There are 8 Eastern Caribbean states. We saw the map earlier: Anguilla, St. Kitts and Nevis, Dominica, St. Vincent and Grenadines. Dominica should not be confused with Dominican Republic. It's actually pronounced a little bit differently as well. Grenada, St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda, and Montserrat. And these independent states make up the Eastern Caribbean Union, and they have a single monetary authority, which is the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. As early as 2017, in their strategic report for the next 5 years, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank clearly elucidated their motivations towards blockchain technology and a central bank digital currency. So they saw certain benefits to this technology, and they stated those benefits. Among these benefits would have been things like improvements to the payment system, innovation to the payment system, a reduction of a method by which there can be a reduction of cash usage within the territory over a period of time, an increase of safety and security due to the lessened handling of cash, and a reduction of cost associated with handling cash. So these were some of the motivations that the ECCB elucidated back in 2017, even prior to beginning the CBDC journey in earnest with the solution provider in 2019. A blockchain technical advisory, a tender for that service was put out, and Pinaka won that tender. And Pinaka, again, is myself and Javed Samuel. Javed led the technical oversight of what was being built by the solution provider to make sure that it met the requirements, the stated requirements of the central bank. So built, test, operationalize the various software modules that were created for this pilot. And there were 5 software modules. There would have been the minting, the FI interface, the financial institution interface, the user apps, which would have encompassed both the end user and the merchant. And of course, the financial institutions would have required a web interface to receive the central bank digital currency. And on the central bank side, there would have been a corresponding app to issue and redeem central bank digital currency within the currency management department. So this was the scope of our remit on that project. I would have served as program manager, overseeing the entire operation, dividing the operation into essentially 4 work streams, where we had sales, marketing, operations, and the technical aspects. The solution itself was a private permissioned blockchain solution. It was account-based. It was a 2-tiered retail CBDC. It was built on Hyperledger Fabric 1.x. I don't recall the exact numeral associated with it, but that in itself, we were limited by the version that we ran, essentially. The software produced would have been done, that development process would have been done so via agile development methodology, and it would have been guided by the stated requirements of the central bank, and including the user concerns on security and privacy. So even prior to us joining the initiative, the central bank held focus groups with their population, and security and privacy would have been key concerns of the population. Everything produced by the solution development team would have been tested before being placed into production, of course, via a change management process. And this is where Javed would have come in and would have worked with the IT department to help them understand what was being produced, how to test it, find issues that need to be resolved, trace those within a format that could be used to see it through to resolution. Operationalization. So it wasn't just a technical product that we were building. Yes, it was a pilot, but it was always meant to go out into the public and for the public to interact with it in a live manner. And by the public, I mean merchants, users, and the financial institutions. So we had to have streams. We had to have the operation stream. We had to have the sales stream and the marketing stream because of this dissemination into a public type of receptive audience. The identification of stakeholders and preparing them, the FIs, the agencies, the merchants, and the general public, this essentially was the ecosystem that we were deploying this solution to. So we had to have proper stakeholder engagement with these various stakeholders. We also had to have stakeholder engagement with the regulators, for example. So the previous presenters would have spoken to the need for working with institutions that have that AML CFT function. And of course, we had the same experience in that we had to come up with a AML CFT framework to allow this financial product to be put into operations in the market. And of course, that required a no objection from the regulator. Part of that would have been the know your customer requirements as well. And that formed the AML CFT framework that was developed and put out for approval. So we had to make sure we had high stakeholder participation from the FIs and the merchants and the users. Admittedly, and we'll talk about this later on, desensitization of the end user group, maybe some more work could have gone into that based on some of the reviews we've seen afterwards. Operationally, we had to have, of course, the service fulfillment and the service assurance processes. It would have required the full attention of our operations team to create the accounts, to issue accounts, to then have any issues tracked should a problem occur with some of the accounts. Financial inclusiveness was part of the objectives outlined by the ECCB, and the way that was fulfilled in the technical product is that we created a separate app, a separate wallet, which would have satisfied that requirement of having a lower threshold for identity proofs, but a corresponding lower limits on that wallet. So, for example, the wallet that was created for registered base users or users that were associated with a financial institution had a higher limit or monthly or daily limit associated with those wallets, as they were already a customer of a financial institution. Whereas if there was someone coming off the streets and just signing up for the first time, we had a tier for them, which was a lower tier, where they would only be required to provide one identity proof, but there was a corresponding lessening of the limits to transactions which they can perform. Lessons learned. There was a constraint, before I go on, there was a constraint imposed on the solution, in that it was mandated that the solution does not integrate with any existing systems. And quite rightly so, it's a pilot system. You want to limit exposure to live systems or existing systems. When I make that distinction, it's because this was real money we were working with. This was not test money. This was real money, transactions being done during the pilot. So it was a pilot, but probably the name pilot had more to do with the scale of operations rather than whether or not it was live transactions. It was live transactions. So there's a need to focus on delivering core services. There's a need to have a diverse team and specific skills. And this was put into practice at the ECCB. We had various subject matter experts on the fintech team that were involved throughout the life of the project. So this was something that was definitely put in place. We had currency management folks, we had folks from legal and regulation, we had folks from banking supervision, for example, and these folks would have been integral towards creating the relationship with the operational aspects of the project, the financial institutions, that relationship, and creating the framework on how this product will be used by that set of stakeholders. These experts would have been key to that process. The financial institutions within this pilot were not simply commercial banks. There was a lower tier of financial institution called credit unions, and those formed part of the authorized financial institutions within the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank DCash project. Reliance on proven technology. So there was an outage. It is recorded in public record that there was there's no beating around the bush with that. We did suffer an outage, and I think what you see now within some of the literature from the Bank of England, for example, is that they have assessed blockchain technology, and they've said for the digital pound project, they want to utilize a DLT, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a blockchain technology. And that could be because of the novelty of it, I suppose, the scale of it as well, the scalability of it as well. These are some of the issues why you may tend more to a legacy technology that you have more experience with than try to utilize a more novel technology. That is not to say that the blockchain technology is flawed in any way. The Bank of England, in their papers on the digital pound, they get into some of the technical details on blockchain technology. So I would refer to that for any questions on the utility of blockchain in a case like this. But in our instance, for the outage, it is a matter of public record that the version of Hyperledger Fabric that we used, there was an issue with certificate management and recovering from an expired certificate. That was an issue. And recovering from an expired certificate did present a challenge to us. And that was what essentially the outage was about. The lack of documentation with that version of Hyperledger Fabric as well, that was a discussed issue at that point from some of the experts that commented on the particular outage. A big lesson that need to be learned here is if you build it, will they come? So the uptake and the usage of retail CBDC deployments, I think everyone or a lot of the central banks that have reached this far have encountered issues in the uptake and usage of the product. We would look at some of the other central banks within the region, what their uptake and usage has been like. But even within China, I believe there have been issues with respect to the uptake and usage there. So it really requires, I would say, sensitization of the users. If you expect users to tend to your product, you need to have some sort of incentive to drive them or incentivize the user behaviors that you would like to see. So it must make sense to the user. Why would they give up their traditional forms of payment to go this route? What is the benefit in it to them? And I think more work needs to be done in that respect. I mentioned earlier as well that we were constrained in not integrating the DCash system with other systems. So, but what we found when we look at the other Caribbean central banks, I believe integration is key, because integration will open up the types of services that you are able to offer to persons. So definitely, as the ECCB contemplates the central bank digital currency 2.0, which is where they are right now, the pilot is now closed. We are no longer associated with the project, but the ECCB is continuing their quest for a new solution, a CBDC 2.0 solution. I don't have any updates on how that process has been going, but I would say that definitely integration with existing payment rails need to take place to really prove out a retail central bank digital currency. So what's next for retail CBDC? So the ECCB did issue an RFI back in December 2023, I believe, or around that time frame, and responses came in. We assisted with the analysis of the responses and utilized that to create a draft of what a RFP would look like for a more commercial permanent solution. So that is now with the ECCB for their handling of that and issuance at a certain point when they get to that point. Clear value proposition and innovative use cases are required to stimulate adoption. So this is really gets to the heart of the uptake and usage discussion. What is the value proposition to the user. What are those innovative use cases that we do not currently have? And some of the innovative use cases may be things like programmability, offline transactions, and advanced payment use cases, things like automated payments enabled by smart contracts and so on. So these are some of the areas that we would like to see. Definitely integration as well. I mentioned integration as well. That needs to happen if retail CBDC is really expected to thrive. Consolidation in the market around larger vendors. So we've noted this as consultants. We've noted that there has been some consolidation in the market. Larger vendors are thriving and taking up space, becoming larger and larger within the CBDC domain. Even our role as consultants, some of the larger vendors are now providing consulting roles on CBDC projects. So they're even encroaching on our space. There's a shift in landscape. There's a competitive landscape that we are seeing emerging, where stable coins are being touted as an alternate to potential CBDCs. We are also seeing something called the commercial bank deposit tokens being touted by the commercial banks as a potential replacement for CBDC. So I think what has happened is the commercial banks view a CBDC as a threat. But if you look at what the ECCB did, it incorporated the financial institutions into the two-tiered architecture, which it maintained in moving from fiat currency to digital currency. They maintained that two-tier issuance process. So the commercial banks are essential within a two-tier architecture. So incorporating commercial banks within your retail CBDC solution, I think that is key. And that removes some of the fears around disintermediation of those entities. So this would ease up the burden of them having to go the route of creating this tokenized bank deposit. But they may choose to go that route in any case. So we look forward to other CBDC projects and becoming involved in other CBDC projects within the region and globally. Just as we close, we're going to take a look at CBDC within the Caribbean. I did mention there are 2 other CBDC projects which are still operational in the Bahamas and in Jamaica. And we have them depicted here. This would have been the Eastern Caribbean domains. Jamaica is the 3rd one to launch, and the Bahamas, of course, was the first retail CBDC to launch globally. So the Bank of Bahamas is Sand Dollar. That was launched in October 2020. These notes come directly from a paper put out by the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City earlier this year. 1 year after launch, the circulation reached around 300,000 Bahamian dollars. Adoption was relatively flat. And it continues that the adoption remained relatively flat throughout the life of it. And it's not ended, it continues. What we have noted is that the Bahamas continues to find or define innovative use cases. So for example, at one point they integrated with the ACH. Again, going back to the point that integration is key. It's not documented here, but at some point they did integrate with one of those payment processing card processors, either MasterCard or Visa, I can't recall. I believe it was MasterCard. So offering that integration with existing retail payment systems, that is important. And the use cases continue to be defined within the Bahamas to bring more innovative use cases to the population as they continue to promote the Sand Dollar product. In the Eastern Caribbean case, the launch was March 2020, initially 4 EC territories. We rolled out to the other territories over the next year, the other 4 territories. At the end of by March 2023, the DCash in circulation was at 2.4 million, or 0.16% of the total currency in circulation at the time. By March 2023, there were 400 merchants participated. I think for the ECCB case, one important thing to note is that the ECCB took on the cost of this entire exercise, which differs from, for example, Jamaica, where Jamaica actually charged the banks to participate within their Jamdex solution. And I believe there's only one bank that was receptive to it, and that was one of the banks. No, it's not listed here, but the wallet would have been issued by an entity called Lynx, and that it continues now. They launched in 2022. 1 month later, 120,000 individuals, 2,300 merchants were onboarded. Circulation basically stalled at one point. And this is where they started to infuse promotions, merchant outreach, education campaigns. In this note, note by the Reserve Bank of Kansas City, they did note that similar efforts within all three territories at a certain point to drive or try to stimulate the uptake via these promotional efforts, via incentives to the users. So it was part of all of these, part of the engagement process to drive that user uptake and usage of the various CBDCs. Jamaica differs from the ECCB as well because it's not a blockchain solution. It's a different type of solution, and all three of these deployments have different vendors. So that's it. Essentially, we ran through various areas: digital currency research within the Caribbean, virtual asset regulation research, some commentary on illicit activity in virtual asset, an informed commentary on the Eastern Caribbean deployment of central bank digital currency, and an overview of the various central bank digital currency projects within the Caribbean. I hope this was informative, and I look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this talk. It was quite interesting and really informative, and there's a lot of questions I have. Let's see. First, if there's anything from the audience. Somebody just wrote basically that it's likely that DAOs, DEXs, liquidity, and things like smart contracts in the future can be good for automating central banks' operations. So anyway, that's just more of a comment than a question. For me, I have a lot of questions. One is how to get stakeholder buy-in from existing financial institutions. So how did you do this for DCash? Because I think if you're bringing something new in and you have banks and other existing players, often there's a lot of friction. And how did you get them to come on board?
Yeah, definitely. Good question. A lot of the entities were concerned around what is this product? How does it replace us? What is the future of it? If we are taking on operational duties with respect to this product, how are we compensated for that activity? And one of the guidelines or the guideposts that we had within the pilot as well is that there was to be no fees charged for the services for the pilot. That may change in a commercial offering, but for the pilot, no fees were to be charged. So of course, certain FIs would have balked at this. They would have been upset by this because they are putting out, they are expending effort at least to modify their existing operations to cater with this product. But we did have a high percentage of, a high financial institution rate. It's documented here as 12 financial institutions 20 financial institutions. So I think that the fact that the ECCB took on the cost of it would have lent itself to this high number of financial institutions that you see here, as opposed to, for example, Jamaica, where the cost burden was on the financial institutions to join. Going forward, definitely in a commercial offering, we need to figure out a revenue model. And if we look at, for example, what is proposed by the ECB, the European Central Bank, in that digital euro project, I believe that the merchants would be the ones that would take on the cost. So somehow someone has to take on the cost. And it needs to be clear, it needs to be articulated in such a way. It could be, right now, I believe the merchants would take on interchange costs with credit card usage, for example. So it could be positioned that, this cost just replaces this other cost that you already absorb within this other product. So it's all a matter of defining exactly what you're putting out, how they benefit from it, and what are the potential costs that they may incur.
Did you do any analysis of what the fees would have to be to actually operationalize it and have it be sustainable?
No. So I should have mentioned at the start that I'm not speaking on behalf of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. I'm speaking in my own private capacity. So even if something like that, I had insight into it, I would not be able to share it. But what I can say is that I don't believe we got to that point of looking at fees because of the constraint placed on the project, that there were no fees to be done. We focused solely on development, operationalization, testing out in the field, rather than looking at developing a commercial model. So for future reference, when they look at that, what that commercial model may look like, what that commercial solution may look like, that may be part of the conversation at that point.
And what about Jamaica and Bahamas? Do they have a fee structure?
I'm not familiar, but I know that Jamaica did charge the financial institution to onboard into the pilot.
That makes sense.
It's a big cost. It is costly. So someone has to take it on, right? So
yeah, and to actually have a production system, you have to do monitoring and have support, and it
correct.
It adds up. How many people used DCash at the end? So you had like 400 merchants in March last year, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah, I can only go by what has been placed out into the public domain. I can't reveal anything further than what is noted here. So what we note here, 4,000 wallet holders, 20 financial institutions, 400 merchants were participating by 2023. What I can say as well is it's a cat and mouse game. So at one point you would think, do the users drive the merchant count, or does the merchant count drive the user count? Which one do you focus on? Do you focus on building out the merchants and have that be the attraction for the users coming in? Or do you show the merchants, look, we have this large pool of users that you can now have shopping at your front? So it's which one do you target, or do you target a mixture of them both? Definitely, I would say some sort of a point scheme or loyalty point scheme needs to be introduced to really incentivize the type of behaviors you want to see in terms of uptake and usage and continuous usage you would like to see at your participating merchants.
Yeah, that's one way to build the network. But if you're a central bank, you have other ways. You can just integrate into existing systems and require regulation that makes it happen. So that's what Cambodia did, for example.
Right. But again, the constraints on this project were that no integration with any other system. Yes.
Yeah. Do you know how it's working in Jamaica? Do they have so you mentioned that Jamaica has integration with like MasterCard or one of these.
No, I think that was the Bahamas. The Bahamas had integration with one of those payment card providers.
Yeah. And
But in both instances, Bahamas and Jamaica, what I've noted is that the use cases continue to develop. So they continue to try to find ways to disburse payments through these systems. So I believe in Jamaica, they integrated government payments at one point to a particular set of workers. So there's a constant revision of finding new use cases to utilize what has been built.
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's integration. I remember we worked on a map feature in Backong so that you could see where you could spend it, and then we took it out because you could spend it everywhere because it was
Right.
standardized at the end with a standardized QR code, which is very common now in Southeast Asia, and it's a really it's a game changer for payments infrastructure because with standardization of a point of sale like format, for example, the QR code,
Yes.
it just lets anyone who has a license get on the network.
Yeah.
There's
One of the things I
downsides,
liked,
of course,
one
too.
of the things I liked with the Bakong deployment, I saw one of the advertisements, and it was an elderly lady selling in a market, and I think that really struck home, the potential use of this thing, not exclusive to any particular age or tech savvy grouping, but anyone can potentially use it. And I think that is what is necessary. We need to demonstrate all ages and all types of persons from all walks of life can potentially utilize something like this. But again, you need to have some incentive for them to do it.
Yeah, and but it's really important to have kind of transparent technology so that the users don't have to think about even how it works.
Yes,
I
agreed.
If you go to Cambodia now, even the merchants on the side of the road, like selling fruit, they have a QR code around their neck,
Yes.
a plastic QR code, and then you can use any of the apps to scan it, and it makes it reduces the cognitive burden that people have because you don't have to think about, what payment network do I have to use. It's just automatic and it works. So that's really the great experience. I don't know why more countries don't do it because we have the tech, but central banks are very slow and methodical, I guess is a good term, as I'm sure you know.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll be keeping an eye out for ECCB's future RFPs if they have any. It would be interesting to do work in the region. I've been to Bahamas before, but I haven't been to the other countries. Well, I've been to BVI, I was in Necker Island before. So that was fun. I have one question about I don't know how to pronounce it. You said it's pronounced Dominica. I call it Dominica, but it's a
Dominica.
yeah, okay. So they use a Tron as a legal tender, supposedly Tron and some of these other cryptocurrencies. Do you know
I
anything?
remember seeing the headline around that. I don't know if it was actually ever implemented. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what took place with that.
I saw the presidential order that brought it to life, and it was like Tron and a BitTorrent token and some other things. But I've never heard of anyone using it actually.
Correct. Correct. Yes.
And plus, aren't they part of the European Central Bank? Or sorry,
ECCB.
Eastern
They are part of the
European Central Bank.
ECCB, the Eastern
Yeah.
Caribbean Union. They are. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know how the treaty is structured there, but in the African unions, they have two in Western Africa and Central Africa. In these, they're not allowed to issue other legal tender. That's why Central African Republic, they accepted the Bitcoin as legal tender, but then a year later they had to withdraw the law because it
Yeah.
was a violation of the treaty. So I would assume that Dominica also has the same problem.
Yeah, I
as the
think there was that that PR that came out and that Dominica was going to have Tron issued as legal tender, but I don't even know if the entity that issued that PR would have been the right entity to declare something legal tender. I believe that is something that the central bank needs to do. So I don't know much about what took place, but the fact that we are not seeing any activity with Tron as legal tender, I think that speaks volumes.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's true.
Yeah.
To me, I've always been been curious about that. I have lots of other questions, but we're out of time. But thanks a lot for this talk. I thought it was really quite, well, to me, it's quite enlightening, and it's always good to see people talking from their real experience and not just a theory.
Yes.
So I think actually I have one last question. Just too curious. Do you know what technology Jamaica is using? Since you said it's not blockchain.
It's a solution by e-currency. It's not a blockchain solution. That's as much as I know.
So it's like a traditional database system?
Could be, yes.
Basically. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for your time. And I guess we'll go to the next speaker without a break since he's already here. So thanks a lot to Shiva.
An ancient prophecy foretold an eclipse that would open a portal to a mystical world, the world of Soratopia, where honor, valor, and swords determine your fate. You can become one of them. Choose your path. Become a true samurai. Explore the vast world of Soratopia. Defeat mighty bosses in various locations. Your sword is your strength and honor. Don't worry, you're not alone. In Soratopia, you'll find loyal waifus to relax with. Engage in the game, pray, complete quests, and accumulate points to become eligible for a massive airdrop. Your path determines your destiny. Choose wisely. The eclipse has awakened, and so have you.
shake it. When the stars fade, don't get in a panic. No, it's just the light of the sunrise making way for the good times.